Welcome back to Dialogue with Deidre. I'm your host, Deidre Malone. As I told you, and I promoted her on Monday, and she is with us today via phone, Jen Myronuk. Thank you so much for being on Dialogue with Deidre. She is so accomplished. I've had an opportunity to work with her, but really got a chance to really get to know her the last three to 6 months, and let me just say she's a dynamo. She's a filmmaker. She's one of the vice presidents of development for the National Women's Political Caucus and the Emma Awards event producer. She put on an excellent show honoring women in the media. Jen, welcome to Dialogue with Deidre.
Thank you, Deidre. Wonderful to be here on the show with you. And likewise, I've really enjoyed collaborating with you and the work that you do, and excited to be part of the program today.
Let me just talk to our viewing audience about the whole concept of the Emmas and the National Women's Political Caucus putting those on. I see a picture right now while you're talking of our president, Donna Lent.
Mm-hmm. Yes, so the National Women's Political Caucus back in 1986 decided to really focus on how do we honor journalists and media makers who are telling the stories of women. And 30 years ago, it really was less of an opportunity to share these stories. We didn't have things, as you know, like YouTube or social media of any kind. So the broadcast and the print publications and the journalists of the day were really the only go-tos that we had for information. And so the partnership with the National Women's Political Caucus to really make that a focus, and the Emmas really have over the years highlighted journalists who are out in the field focusing on our bottom line issues as the National Women's Political Caucus. And we are the oldest women's organization focused on electing progressive pro-choice women candidates for any party, and we have been really active on the forefront of making sure that women can stand up and get elected and pursue their dreams of elected or appointed office, as well as training people behind the scenes to run campaigns, and then also encouraging those who are making headlines to write those stories to help us really further the cause of everything that we believe in with the National Women's Political Caucus, to make our country the best country possible with as many people participating at the table.
Now, Jen, quick question. We've been putting the Emmas on for a while now, the National Women's Political Caucus, and with that, can you talk to me about the process of selecting the awardees?
Yes. So every year we open up submissions, and what we'll do is a specific time frame where people can submit articles. We really are open to anyone who writes, but the focus is really looking at issues of importance to women and girls. And so people can submit, whether it's print publications, documentaries, television shows, films, basically all forms of media. And then we have a wonderful panel of judges that will come from universities, from industry, from media, and they will read, watch, experience every single entry and come up with a way to score, and then we have our finalists. And of those finalists, we select the Emma Award winners.
And the Emma Award winners this year, let me just say, Jen, they were absolutely amazing. Some of them included Diane Jennings and Sarah Mervish, if I pronounced her name correctly, for their interactive documentary series Deadly Affection, the Dallas Morning News. And I know you've had an opportunity to speak with a lot of the awardees. What were your thoughts on some of our awardee, submissions?
Well, this year, as you mentioned, I had the honor of getting to be the event producer, and what I did is really go beyond just acknowledging that they've won their work, but I inquired with each one of our awardees, how would they like to talk about their specific piece? And in the case of Diane Jennings and Sarah Mervish, they really took their role as, media makers in the Dallas area very seriously when Dallas became the number one, the statistics at least, place for domestic violence and for deaths, and they wanted to move past reporting and into engaging the community. So it was wonderful to have that conversation. Sarah is actively reporting the news, and so she put together a statement about the project, and it's interactive. And as they said, that when they were having people call the local shelters or talk to local police departments, they would say, "Who referred you?" And they would say Dallas Morning News. And they really felt that that role of stepping into engaging and informing, not just simply reporting. And it was where I feel a good place for journalism to go, which is allowing the audience to really connect to the content. So each one of our awardees this year, we had a good conversation and really talked about, how they're bringing their stories to their readers or to their viewers, and how could we represent that in the Emmys.
Let me just say a highlight for me and many of the attendees of the Emma Awards was having Sissy Farrenho there. And I know that you wanted to make sure that she was present for the award presentation for Karen Engel, Joe Bailey Jr., and Susan Richardson for the Noble Citizen online multimedia exhibition. But just having an opportunity to hear her talk about her run for office and just her public service life in general was very moving for a lot of us, and then for those of us associated with the National Women's Political Caucus because of the role she played with the caucus. What were your thoughts on her being there?
Well, first, huge kudos to the team. As you mentioned, Karen, Joe, and Susan, and there's a whole group of them. They spent 5 years to take a life story. So Sissy Farrenhold, as we saw, she was elected to office in Texas, and then she was being promoted and was being considered for the vice president position in 1972, which would have been the first female vice presidential candidate. And she then shortly after became the first chair of the National Women's Political Caucus. And one thing, looking at what do you do when you have so much content, and how do you engage when someone's had a very long and involved career? And so they decided to look at all of the early footage as well as later in her career as she focused on human rights. And both, she's significant to the National Women's Political Caucus and to this country for her absolute devotion to policy and to issues of human rights and civil rights and the Equal Rights Amendment in Texas. So I thought it was wonderful for the Emma Award-winning documentary for us to get to experience that, and it's available through the University of Texas Law and the Bernard and Audrey Rappaport Center for Human Rights. But also to experience Sissy. She's almost 90 years old, and as you saw, she was fantastic. I mean, her speech, and you could see why having an interactive documentary online to capture the spirit of who she is, and then hearing her speak. And she is one of our, I think, most treasured, citizens in this country, and she really represents what it means to be civically engaged. So I thought that was a highlight as well, and it was wonderful to connect with both the team and to have Sissy there in person.
And Jen, let me just say that, I'm in my 50s, early 50s, and it's very seldom that I can just talk off the top of my head for 5 minutes and rattle off statistics, 5-10 minutes and rattle off statistics. And with Sissy being 90, she's just incredible and phenomenal, and because she's lived it and she's passionate about it, just an icon. And we were just so glad to have an opportunity to meet her and to have her there, specifically with the historic role she plays with the National Women's Political Caucus. And then, being nominated for Vice President of the United States, just amazing. Amazing.
And how relevant her story is today as we're in the middle of our election. And again, the stories we tell, we have so many stories in the U.S. that are unexplored and really worth not just documenting but experiencing, and knowing that that's that's part of our lineage. And certainly Sissy's story is right there. And I think it was, again, a wonderful highlight. It was one of the big focal points of our event was to really bring to life not just a documentary, but have the subject there to talk and have us experience her as a community.
Jen, before we let you go, I do want an opportunity to talk to you about the work that you're doing. You're an accomplished filmmaker, and interesting background, because I know that you have a technology background too. And
yes.
I believe is it IT background and now film? I mean, just fascinating. Talk to me about your work in film.
So I'm a native to Silicon Valley and was raised by an engineer father and an artist mom. So I've always had an interest in both technology and the arts, and have been active in different groups. I've actually been a part of the National Women's Political Caucus for 20 years. But about 7 years ago, I decided to really focus on filmmaking. I've done different films and different projects, smaller documentaries, oral histories, etc. But I wanted to dive into this one specific field called living history, or Chautauqua. And Chautauqua is a form of storytelling where somebody will embody a famous person or a notable person, and the audience will travel back to meet that person in their time. So I started off by producing a set of stories about women's suffrage and the suffragists, and that was Julia Ward Howe, who wrote The Battles of the Republic, Alice Paul, who passed the 19th Amendment, and also Caroline Churchill, who was a suffragist in Colorado. All three suffragists were portrayed by young girls. I mean, they were 13, 14, 15, and we took this play to the National Women's Hall of Fame in Seneca Falls. And so from there, I decided to pursue how do we take theater and film and allow the audience to connect with what I call embodied wisdom. So I've been producing the living history of Marie Curie, the physicist, back in our play is set in 1915, but her Nobel Prize in 1906 and again in 1911 for physics and chemistry revolutionized our world. And how do you tell the story from their perspective? And so we did a film of what I would call like a historic TED Talk. And we were able to create an immersive, interactive environment where we hear from a famous scientist, but we hear from her as a person. I also produced the living history of Eleanor Roosevelt.
Oh, my goodness.
And the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. And I think overall, from being a filmmaker and an artist, what we need most right now is to connect with our shared history and our shared wisdom. So I really enjoy being able to do the kind of filmmaking which allows the audience to fully connect with the content, and in that moment feel like maybe they did meet this person, and then they get to meet more of themselves. And so I find that as satisfying as working with media and working with the National Women's Political Caucus, that we have to co-create the future we want to live in. And right now it's important for us to tell good stories about who we can be as humans, because that becomes who we believe we can become. And right now especially, I think that filmmakers as well as media makers, we have to hit the issues head on, but we have to do that with grace and also fact-based, as well as really making sure the audience knows that there are people out there on the front lines fighting for rights and fighting for humanity, and for us to be able to tell those stories well, I think makes a huge difference.
Jen, if anyone wants to see some of the films that you've created, is there a website or a link that they can go to view them? Please share that with us.
Yeah, so what's happening is I just had my first preview screening of Humanity Needs Dreamers, A Visit with Marie Curie at the Cambridge Science Festival in April. And we're launching a platform called STEM on Stage. And as you know, STEM is science, technology, engineering, and math. And STEM on Stage is a STEAM project. So it's STEMonstage.org. people can sign up, and they'll be added to our newsletter, and we'll be looking to do our launch of the film in the fall, and people can set up screenings, and we're aiming for a big event on November 7th, part of Marie Curie's birthday celebration. So if they want to visit STEMOnstage.org and sign up, that would be wonderful.
Well, what we will do, Jen, is we'll make sure that we post that on the Dialogue with Deidre Facebook page. So when people visit the page, they'll know directly where to go, STEMonstage.org, to check out the films. And so excited to have you on the show. And when you're about to do your showing of Marie Curie, we want to make sure that you come back in early November so we can share more information about your latest film.
Thank you so much. Really enjoyed being on the show today.
Thank you so much, and we'll look forward to talking to you soon, having you come back on.
Thank you so much, Deidre. Thanks.
All right, you're watching Dialogue with Deidre. We'll be back in a moment.